Welcome back to another episode of the Forces Employment Charity, the podcast. I am your host, Catherine, and throughout our podcast series, we explore the incredible stories, insights, and resources that empower service leavers, veterans, reservists, and their families in their quest for meaningful careers and fulfilling lives. This month, we are celebrating the armed forces and focusing on the transition from military service to civilian careers, particularly in corporate careers. So we're discovering how bridging the gap between military service and skills and corporate careers benefits both veterans and organizations, which fosters a culture of diversity, inclusion, and innovation. Joining us today is Michael from Lloyds Banking Group. Michael, welcome. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you very much.
Let's start with your journey. Can you share a bit about your military background and how you got to your current role today?
Sure, yeah. So I joined the Army in 2012. I joined the Royal Signals. I was a communication systems engineer at the time. There's been many changes to the name since, but there'll be a few people out there that recognise that. I started off based in Germany. I started on satellite communications platforms, and then I moved into more ICS, IT kind of stream, if you want to call it. And then I just evolved into managing a team that did that same kind of function, just all over Europe mainly, and a few places here and there.
Wonderful. And how did you get to Lloyds Banking Group? Was this during the pandemic, during your transition period?
Yeah, so I signed off from the forces on my birthday, I think, in 2019. And then obviously before that, I didn't know COVID was coming. So
Yeah.
2020, I ended up actually leaving the forces at the peak of, I think, what was the second wave of COVID in the UK. So just before the lockdown actually came in place. So it's a bit chaotic. Um, I then joined Bet365 as a network support team leader, managing a team essentially the same as what I did in the military, supporting IT functions. I did 2 years, 2.5 years or so at Bet365, and then opportunity at Lloyd came up, which I applied for. Successful, and now I'm the 24/7 Firewall Team Manager within Lloyd's.
And I mean, transitioning during the pandemic must have been very difficult. Did you encounter any challenges during that transition?
Yeah, I think as everybody probably experienced in their own way, it created challenges that nobody was really prepared for. Leaving the forces, I found um, all the standard steps that you have to take and the kind of sign-offs that you need and the courses that you can attend were just gone. Wasn't able to take advantage of the full resettlement period. Not that everybody does either, but in this case, it was particularly just inaccessible.
And I mean, how did you overcome them? Did you were there any support, any resources that helped you with that transition, especially finding work with Lloyds Banking Group, where you are now? How did that come about?
So when I was leaving, I think the support I did have the support of my training commands. Everybody was in it
Mhm.
together, so I wasn't just abandoned. Um, Also had my wife as well to
Yeah.
complain to. Um,
That
so
helps.
she put up with me for a while. Um, I think the support I really had was really just knowing that this is what I needed to do and I had to just get on and make the best of it. I was decided to leave for a while and I was committed to it. Um, I'd been interviewing ahead of time anyway, so I had some experience of interviewing and a few roles had come my way that I decided weren't suitable. So I knew I was employable, which took the pressure off somewhat. Um, and fortunately, I was able to secure early release. So when an opportunity did come up, I could jump on it. And thankfully, my chain of commands were agreeable to let me go. Perhaps COVID went in my favour at that time because it was not a period of time where, especially my unit, was particularly busy because couldn't really do a lot. still being worked out. So fate played a part, as it ever does, but also the people I had around me, and also had TechVets, which has supported me. So having a community that I could talk to and bounce ideas off. And at that time, I didn't especially know what I wanted to do. I just knew what I could do at that moment, and just focused on leaving the military into something that I knew I could work with and develop from.
And we'll get into tech vets in a minute. But you mentioned briefly that you knew you were employable. I love that saying because I think everyone should be saying that. And also, can you highlight some of the key skills and experiences that you gained personally during your military service? I mean, what did you learn from your time in the military, and how did those transferable skills fit into Civvy Street?
So for my trade group, especially, it's a technical hands-on role. So I was exposed to network engineering anyway. But in my career specifically, I managed to start to evolve into a manager, a team manager towards the end of my career, just naturally. So as I promoted, I was I left as a corporal, but I had experience of an acting role of a sergeant whilst I was deployed. So I had that step up as well. Um, but throughout my career, you always have to be put in situations where you need to lead and take charge of people, or um, show them the way that things need to be done. And that kind of naturally carried over into a civilian role, where you're put in a leadership role to achieve a certain task or goal within a business area. More general terms, the army, it teaches you to be adaptable, I think, is one of its key strengths. It's people in the military have a lot of change going on in their lives. There's a lot to manage in your personal life to make sure that you can achieve your work role. So be that if you're deploying somewhere, especially those that have got children, are married, having to coordinate organising your life at home to prepare so you can leave and everything's okay. With your spouses, it shouldn't be underestimated. That is a lot of moving parts to ensure are okay. So added to the fact that just military life in general, you move quite a lot, either doing deployments or exercises, changing your posting. It's essentially like having a new job every 2 or 3 years. So
Mhm.
you're constantly putting into a new environment which you need to adapt to and find your feet quite quickly. And before you know it, happens all over again. So you
Yeah.
quickly gain a lot of experience of different environments and learn how to adapt to them, I think.
Yeah, so it definitely applies to your transferable skills, definitely apply to civilian workplaces. Absolutely. Was your transition what you expected it to be? And if not, what were the surprises? What were the learnings um, that you took away from that?
I did not expect a worldwide pandemic. No, that was not ever on my mind that it would ever happen. So no, it wasn't what I expected at all. Um, I didn't expect to find a role quickly, and it did take a few months, in fairness, like over 6 months to find that role that I was comfortable with. But looking back, it was relatively simple. It was identify the skills that I've got, how that applies to a civilian role, or what I wanted to go into, and start reaching out to people and applying and getting that experience. So um, I think, yes, although it wasn't quite how I expected it to go, I think it worked for me, and I was able to make the best of it, really.
What would you tell others about to embark the process now, the transition process? What would you tell them?
The best time to plan is yesterday. The next best time is today. If you go to sign off from your military career, if at all possible, make sure you've thought through what your immediate steps after are, because it is all too easy to um, sign off in a fit of frustration that you're just sick of military life and your training commander terrible for you, or you've got your partner um, that is sick of it and you're leaving to support them and make family life easier. But you'll be a lot better off if you've got a sketch of a plan that you can start to act on and find those places where you can get support to complete that successfully. You just don't want to be in a situation where you have got a month left and you've done none of your training courses, you've done none of your upskilling or networking or LinkedIn, for example, and you just have to take anything that comes because it's not going to be a fun time. So you want to avoid it as much as you can. And there are resources there. There's no reason why you can't plan and do some of those tasks in advance.
Resources like the Forces Employment Charity.
Exactly,
Next
yeah.
then.
Perfect segue.
Now that we heard about a bit about your personal journey, sorry, and the invaluable skills that you've brought from service to your corporate career, let's shift our focus now to the corporate perspective. So veterans like yourself offer we've learned a wealth of unique skills and qualities that can significantly enhance the workplace. It's important for not just veterans, but employers to better understand and leverage these skills, and what initiatives are in place to support veterans in their career transitions. Can you just give us a list of skills and qualities that you believe veterans bring to the corporate workplace? You've mentioned a few: adaptability, and so on. But what is that list for you? What does that entail?
So I think mentioned before about adaptability is really important. The forces change constantly, the requirements of you change constantly, and you have to put your best foot forward and do what you can in those situations. Part of that becomes the high pressure environments that you're exposed to. Your training supports you to deal with those kind of situations, and the forces love training, so you're constantly doing it throughout the year, be that rotations into deployments or just exercises in the UK, working on the equipment that your discipline is for. I think as well, just a strength that has to be the breadth of experience that people get working with other teams, other cultures, nationalities, working in other cultures, other countries even. It shouldn't be underestimated that isn't a normal working environment to be sent halfway around the world and being told, right, go do your job like you would back in the UK. It can be off-putting and it does take time to kind of find your feet, but I think the forces are particularly good at doing that just by the very nature of their role. If you want people in your company to be able to take a challenge and just dive right in and deliver very quickly, I think the forces are a very good option for you.
Absolutely. And I think there's an incredible amount of diversity as well in the armed forces because of those postings, because they aren't just working throughout the UK, they're working, elsewhere in the world. So they are open to all these different new learnings, new cultures, new values that they open up to. So the armed forces is a very diverse set of individuals. And I highly believe that they will be valuable in any civilian setting. How can we change the mindset and break down stereotypes about what it means to work in, well, not a bank like yourself, but in a corporate career? What are there any stereotypes? Are there any misconceptions? How do we break those down? Because for me, thinking it from my perspective, in when you're serving, there are different ranks. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But what is it? Stop is We don't want, because everyone is so valuable in the armed forces that everyone can bring something to the table. What we don't want them we don't want that stopping them to applying for a role in the civilian workplace that's a managerial role. Look at you, you've made it, Michael. You are now in a managerial role. What is stopping? How can we stop that misconception of don't aim lower, aim higher, in a way, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it works both ways. So it's the misconception of the forces community thinking that they can't do something when um, we all need to get better at knowing the skills that we have and we develop and how that is relevant to the civilian marketplace. So selling ourselves is part of the battle. We could all do a better job. I think most people in the forces don't shout about their service. It's not about the recognition of being in the army. I don't think for the vast majority of people, um, it's the love of the job and the love of the lifestyle. But for the business side, I think it's recognizing that yes, a rank does provide an idea of what their role is and the exposure they may have to certain things. It's not mutually exclusive. So yes, I was a corporal, but I was managing at times 30 people that were deployed around the world and helping them, supporting them remotely, which is, I suppose, even more relevant. Just as there are even officers that have done exactly the same for different reasons. So yes, I didn't do all the tasks that an officer did, but likewise, they didn't do all the tasks that a soldier would have done in my case. But there is a useful in between where all service personnel can add value to a business. I think it's all relevant skills.
And what would you say to organizations wanting to hire or looking at pathways for veterans to hire in their corporate organizations?
I think for me personally, it was the outreach to make it obvious that they are viable roles. So I'll be honest, when I was leaving, I never even thought financial services was a route that I could go into employment. I was thinking of traditional kind of IT companies that you'd think, well, I do IT, so they do IT. I'll look at those roles. But then, really, any major company, or any company at all, has IT to some degree, um, and financial services is no different. If anything, it's even more relevant. So, being aware that people might not necessarily know that your business area has roles that are relevant, I think, um, is important, and businesses need to learn perhaps a bit better that if they were just to reach out a little bit, just to explain that, they would have a lot of people realizing, oh, that is an option for me, and then obviously they could apply, and the business may recognize that they've got skills that they actually need, but they weren't aware previously.
Ending on that note, well, let's go into more of the creating pathways for veterans. So, um, diving into how organizations can create those effective pathways for veterans, it's vital to highlight the importance of recognizing, like you said, and valuing military skills during the hiring process. So talk to us a little bit about the different types of pathways that can happen for veterans, or why it's crucial for employers to create these pathways. You kind of dabbled onto that, but can you explain that in more detail, maybe, please?
Yeah, I think there are businesses out there that have their own kind of outreach where they um, approach serving or personnel that are leaving the forces at career events like the CTP events, that kind of thing, and say we've got job roles that would suit your offering. Come out have a conversation. So there's those kind of outreach, I think, which are important to be aware of. There's also the various charities and like TechVets I mentioned previously, where it's a group of people trying to support veterans and support their learning, and make those connections with businesses that don't necessarily have those touch points with serving personnel, and to kind of bridge that gap and just educate those businesses that serving personnel do have the skills that they need.
What about the concept of creating pipelines for veterans and fostering supportive workplace culture? So, an organization has hired someone from the armed forces. How can they create a pipeline now for fostering that supportive workplace culture? Is there anything more that they can do to help with that inclusivity and make sure that it all stays positive?
Having a recruitment area or awareness of what the forces are offering um, embedded into a business is key. So if you get a military applicant, knowing what their CV is actually telling you. So it's one thing that can be quite difficult when you're leaving the forces, is translating what you've done in the forces into what is now civilian business speak, which you may not have had much exposure to in the first place. So I've said it myself, I've said like deployment and exercise, and that might not actually mean anything to somebody looking at a CV. And if they read it and go, I don't know what that means, sometimes that can be enough just to pass on the CV when that could be a perfectly valid candidate, but just through not recognizing what is behind those kind of words and that language, they've kind of discounted themselves automatically. So having somebody in a recruitment team that knows that and understands what is being presented can be quite valuable, and it can open a resource pool that maybe a business doesn't necessarily have a sight into. Likewise for, I suppose, the support structures that are out there, teaching veterans how to translate their military language into civilian speak is likewise just as important, so we can help ourselves first, really.
What initiatives and programs has Lloyd Banking Group implemented to support veterans in their career transitions? Are there any?
So at the moment, it's very much a homegrown kind of effort. So
Nice.
I've reached out to people within the bank that I've found out are ex-forces just through conversation, and we've kind of come together as our own community just to um, have somebody to talk to really that has a similar background, and just for the sake of having a chat about old times, I suppose.
Yeah.
We are trying to raise that awareness within the bank that the armed forces is a viable talent pool. There isn't an official pipeline just yet, but we're in the early days of making sure it's an inclusive environment for ex-forces as well, just like many other areas of the bank.
So now we can go into TechVets. You mentioned you had some support from them. Was that during your transition period, or was it right after you found work with Lloyd's?
So it's up to now, really, I suppose, from the very start. I can't quite remember how I found out about TechVets, I'll be honest, but all that time ago. But I, when I was leaving the forces, I was looking for those resources of what am I actually going to do, and I must have come across TechVets in LinkedIn. It must have been, and I'm so glad I did because that community has been so supportive in just at the very least, just bouncing ideas off other like-minded people that are going through the same process, um, and just kind of as a sounding board for me personally, it was very useful just to say, "I'm thinking of doing this. Does that make sense?" And um, the typical military fashion, just telling people straight what they need to know. Um, I found it very reassuring that I had somebody there to help steer me. Um, I know via TechVets, I managed to reach out to a hiring manager in IT and just have a quick, I think it was a half an hour call, and just to talk about what my intent was and did that make sense. And that
Hmm.
gave me a lot of reassurance that I was approaching things in the correct way, and in some ways how I wasn't, so I could change it as well. But since then, I've stayed as part of the community, so I try to help others that are going through that and answer questions, and it's just grown from there. So um, there's a core team now that are the TechVets team that um, help deliver the training courses and support the outreach of people. And there's a volunteer group as well that just try to be points of contact in business that can um, be that steer that I had all that time ago as well. So I'm very grateful for TechVets, and I do owe them a lot.
And for those who are listening who aren't aware of TechVets, TechVets is a program within the Forces Employment Charity that exists as a bridge for veterans, and echoing what Michael said, for veterans, service leavers, reservists, and also their families into information technology careers. So if you are interested, if this is something that speaks to you, um, there's more information on our website and also on the TechVets website. What is next for you, Michael? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Interview questions, right? I think consolidating where I am, I think, is my main goal. Just making sure that, suppose as a manager, I'm doing things right, and just developing my professional kind of repertoire of skills. I think may sound generic, but there's a lot to get right and a lot to learn just within my role currently, and just as a professional in general.
And do you have any final words, any advice for those who were in your position a while ago, and maybe to organizations, to the employers out there? Any final words to them?
I think to people that are leaving the forces or thinking of it, you can't prepare too early. I think if you've got that inkling that you may want to, start now and just lay the groundwork to make it as easy as possible. As I found that you can never really trust the future. You never know what's going to happen, but you can definitely give yourself the platform to make it as easy for yourself as humanly possible, and just work the rest out as you go. Lean on those skills that you've developed in the forces already. For employers, I think it's just, if you can't see the immediate value of the armed forces, that's fine. But just try to ask those questions to yourself, or is there something that we don't have from the current talent pools that we engage with that perhaps the armed forces do provide? And start reaching out to these communities that are already there, banging this drum, saying that we've got what you need, and take the time to learn what the forces does provide, and just try not to walk into any of the stereotypes that you might have about what the armed forces is, because it has changed in my time of joining. It's changed since then, and it's changed after as well. So it's constantly evolving. So the days of the armed forces being shout first, do what you're told without thinking are long gone. It wasn't the case when I was in.
Well said, Michael. And this won't be the last time you see Michael, actually. He will actually be speaking at the Forces Employment Charity Pathways into Tech event, which is happening on Wednesday, 11th of September from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Google Academy in London. So if you are looking for an opportunity to meet key contacts, and build a new career in tech and cyber, this event is for you. Or if you're just curious, anyone from the whole armed forces community is welcome to join. And it will focus on exploring the sector and spotlight sessions, which will focus on cybersecurity, data roles, IT infrastructure, software development and programming, to name a few. So you'll hear from hiring managers, military pathway leads, and build valuable connections with them. You'll also hear from those who have traveled before you as a service leaver or a veteran like Michael himself into Civvy Street. So we are working in partnership with Google UK, who's hosting this year's event in September. So there will be 12 employers present, some of whom will be part of the discussion panels, and all of whom will be exhibiting in the marketplace throughout the day. So that will give you a chance to network with each of them. So have a look on the Forces Employment Charity. The event is now live. Registrations are now open. So please feel free to come and learn something new. Michael, I would just like to thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you at Pathways into Tech in September.
Thank you very much. And yeah, if anyone wants to reach out on LinkedIn, please just add me, send me a message. I'm there all day at the Google Academy, so I'm sure we can arrange to have a catch up if you'd like.
Wonderful. So it's very evident that bridging the gap between military service and civilian careers not only benefits the veterans themselves, but also enriches organizations, which is what we've learned today. It fosters diversity, inclusion, and innovation. We hope this episode has shed light on the invaluable skills veterans bring and the importance of supporting their transitions into civilian careers. Whether you are a service leaver, reservist, veteran, or part of a military family, if you are feeling discouraged or seeking assistance in your employment journey, reach out to the Forces Employment Charity today. We are here to guide you, connect you with opportunities, and offer free support. Stay connected with Forces Employment Charity, the podcast, for more captivating conversations with remarkable individuals like Michael himself within the Armed Forces community. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.